All right. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in and I'm going to think about my daisy, right? And I'm gonna think about how the structure of my daisy comes into play. So I want there to be a fairly, I'm gonna come down a little bit. There we go. So I want to have a round, mostly round center, and I want it to be fairly big. If you look, I am about one, two, 2/3 of the way up, and I've added a center. Okay. Now my daisy petals, I'm gonna think about this. I want them to be slightly asymmetrical. So I'm gonna think about making this like kind of an egg shape, right? So I want this to be a little longer right here. And I want my yolk to just be slightly off center if this was an egg, okay? And I'm going to come in and I'm going to start to piece in my petals. And your petals on a daisy, let me flip this over a little bit and I'll demonstrate a petal. So they're a little bit square or like rectangle-ish. They're a little squared off, but then they come down, right? And then they dip in a little bit, right? So they are, right? So we've got, if we start with a rectangle, right? We'll start with a rectangle. We'll round that rectangle. We'll come down, and then they have almost like a little tab. And that little tab slots in to our circle, okay? Remember we talked about the details of this, right? So by making that little slot, it's gonna give us a better, kind of a better feel for our whole thing overall. So I want to lighten this, or I'm not going to, but I would lighten that outer ring, right, of our egg shape. And I would just keep that lighter because that's going to be erased later, or that's going to be what we're not going to ink in. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to start to put in some petals. So I've got, this is going to kind of be a rounded kind of rectangle, a little slot. I'm going to make a ring of these and I'm leaving gaps, right? So this is a little longer. This one is maybe a little longer still, but still in the general range, right? And I'm just working my way around, leading these little petals. And like this one is gonna, because it's on the side, I'm making it kind of narrower. Okay, and I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna kind of go in the other direction now. But I'm thinking about these as if they are gonna slot in, like I'm using them like a push pin, okay? And we've drawn daisies before, so there's that same basic shape, but usually we pay more attention to like the overall large gross shapes, right? And today we're kind of paying attention to some of these micro details. So I just want to get these in first, right? So I'm just kind of sketching these in, right? I want to kind of add some flower petals that have little points and some that are more squared off. Okay, so I have kind of this flower shape going around. And now I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna add another layer, right? So I'm just gonna make sure that these fit, and I'm not going to fill this in too much, right? Like there's gonna be a gap there. Maybe I'll have a longer skinny petal there. I'm gonna take this one and I'm actually gonna make it pointed. I'm gonna fill some of this in with some like baby petals. maybe I'll add another one right here, and maybe this one will be a little more rounded. Right here, I'm going to come in and I'm going to make a line right here. I'm going to make a little bit of a wiggle, and I'm going to bring this over. I'm going to bring this like this, right down, and then I'm going to bring in that petal right there. So I'm going to erase everything out of here, right? So I've got a petal that's just kind of folded over here. This is going to come like this. I'll darken that in so you can see it a little bit more, right? So this petal kind of tucks in right here, and you could put it wherever you'd like. We've got a folded petal there. Maybe I'm going to add another one that just kind of comes up and over here. So I'll erase that out. Bring this a little bit like that. Okay. Just so that I have some details of these little petals, right? Maybe a little shorter one here. I'm going to erase out now this ring, right? Because once that ring's gone, I can see and decide if I want to fill in any of these gaps, or if I want to leave this ring, or if I want to leave it a fairly open little daisy, right? With missing some petals and all of that. Okay, I like it like this, but I think it needs something right in here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this one, I'm gonna round this petal a little bit. I'm gonna erase that. I'm gonna leave that like this, and then I'm gonna make another petal right there. Okay, so I have my daisy right here. I'm going to come in and I will add in some lines and stuff at the end. I'm just going to erase out a little bit more of that. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to add in a stem, right? A nice thicker stem, because remember, it needs to be able to hold my flower, right? With this nice heavy ball. So what I'm going to do here though, is I'm going to make another kind of concentric circles. So this is offset right here. I'm going to narrow that down so I just have kind of that one line like this. And then I am going to come in and I am going to, from right about here, I'm going to make some swirled lines. Okay. I'm going to continue those out past that other line. And then I am going to make them going in the opposite direction. What I'm going to end up with is a whole bunch of little, almost like a checkerboard in here, right? I'm just going to continue to make lines going across, and then I'm going to come in and I'm going to fill all these little spaces with an orb, okay? These are going to be where my pollen will collect. Now, I want you to think about all of these little spaces, and I want you to think of like in Zeppel, and the way that we would fill that in, right? So we want these to be some little circles. Okay. And then we've got these lines out here. I'm going to actually erase those out. And I'm going to put in some, so I'm kind of making some curved like little C shapes going all the way around. Okay. And then I'm going to kind of go in the opposite direction. So they're almost like little X's, because these are going to be our petals that haven't sprung up yet. Okay. But you can see how with this, right, the little details, these little teeny tiny details are going to be what really makes it pop a little bit more. As far as our stem, I'm just going to add in some line work in my pencil, right, to give it a little bit of texture. And then I'm going to come into each of my petals and I'm going to add in some pencil lines, some pencil like hatching, right? Following the path of those petals. Yeah, I'll add another one right in there. And you could certainly do this if you wanted to, right? On your in pen, right? If you were looking to do something in pen to kind of do a line drawing or a contour drawing. My goal with this is going to be to give myself something that I can then come in with minimal color, right? And I could do this with some watercolor, or I could do this with some marker, which is actually what I'm going to demonstrate in just a minute. So I'm just going to add a little bit of shading there, some lines here, a little bit more of a line right there, right? And then I can come in with my tortillon and I can soften some of this, right? To give myself those edges to my petals, right? Our daisies are traditionally white. So I don't want to do a ton of color work here. Okay. I'm going to come in right here. I'm going to come up on my stem and add a little bit more dark right underneath my petals. And then I'm going to pause for just a minute here. Okay. And then what I have here is I have 2 yellows and then a spring green Eco Line marker. Okay. I'm going to share again. So now I am going to come in just a little bit right in here with my yellow. Okay. I'm going to darken this in as well. Now, if you are using your Ecoline markers, right, they're water-based, so they are going to do things like pick up your pencil. Before I put it away, I always scribble that off so that it doesn't damage my marker. Right. I also have kind of this marigold color that I'm going to come in here with and add in some darker color, right, a little bit right along that edge. Right. I'm going to pick up my green. I'm going to add in my green color, and what you can see, and one of the things that I like to show with this is that all your pencil shading, right, that pencil shading added into my my marker work, right? So I'm going to come in now, right, and I'm just going to finish off these connections on my petals, right? So I want them looking kind of like they're tucked in to that center, right? Like a push pin, right? So I just want to make sure I have that look. And then I'm going to soften this with my tortillon. And I did it a little bit with the line work, but now I'm using the tortillon to really kind of drive that home and give me that look, right? But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm adding just a little bit of green in here, just a little bit right around the outside of my, just a little bit around the outside of my yellow, right? Just because you're gonna have those little hints of color. I'm gonna add a little bit of it into my petals, just at the tips, maybe not a lot, just a tiny touch and a tiny touch of my yellow, because that's gonna add in those beautiful colors, right? And it's just a little flick here and there. And then I'm gonna come back with my pencil and I'm gonna refine again, kind of, right? And my tortillon. And the reason that I like my eco lines is because they are in fact water-based, right? So because they are water-based, it gives me the opportunity to come in with a damp brush and to just soften those edges, those colors that I added in. Now, they look a little stronger on the projector than they actually are, and that's okay. I'm just going to kind of work at it. I'm not going to do all of them, right? But you can just kind of soften those colors. And now I'm going to come back in, and you can do it with your pencil, you could do it with your pen, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to darken in all the little spots that I want to be dark. Right around my little flower. So again, and I can define these petals a little more if I want to, if I wanted them to be, and I purposely wanted those edges to be kind of messy. I would spend some time softening these a bit more, but I think that it captures the idea that we were going for, which is to create these colors, right? This black and white piece that has these hints of color, but then when you look at it, our pencil work is adding all kinds of little detail to it. So anyway, this is just a fun way to play with something that might be really a simple design, but by focusing on those macro pieces, those details, you're going to get a much different look than you would if you focused on the big picture, so to speak. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you had fun with it, and I can't wait to see your daisies.